You're listening to the AmWritingFantasy podcast. In today's publishing landscape, you can reach fans all over the world. Query letters are a thing of the past. You don't even need a literary agent. There is nothing standing in the way of making a living from writing. Join two best-selling authors who have self-published more than 20 books between them. Now, on to the show with your hosts, Autumn Burt and Jasper Schmidt.
Hello, I'm Jasper.
And I'm Autumn.
This is episode 153 of the AmWritingFantasy podcast, and it is time for our critical reading of Jade City by Fonda Lee. And we'll be sharing our thoughts and views with the aim to see what we writers can learn from this book.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it because it was such an interesting story. But, listening right now, if you are planning on reading this book and you haven't yet, spoilers. There will be spoilers. So
Yes.
Keep that in mind if you're listening. This is a critical review, not a blurb or a teaser. We're going to rip it apart and say what we love, what we wish had been different, and see what else we can learn from this book.
That will be it, yes. And we also got a few remarks from Patreon supporters, so we will also mention some of that as well.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it. I happen to have read some of those comments, and I'm kind of in agreement with them, so that'll be really fun.
I am for the most part as well. So,
all right, end of episode. No,
that was it. Go and read. Go and read the thread, and that's it.
You're all set. All right. Well, how are things over in Denmark? It's been a little while since we talked, which was partially my fault. I will warn viewers now. I had a cold. It wasn't COVID, knock on wood, but it's definitely knocked me for a loop. So if my voice is a little hoarse, or if I swear I will cough, I'll either mute myself or I'll go away from the microphone. But yeah, there's a chance I'm still coughing a little bit. So it's been a while. This episode was supposed to be the previous one, and we just couldn't get together because cold. I got a cold.
Yeah, this was supposed to be episode 152, and then it now turned out to be 153, and well, it was a bit of a mess because we had to rearrange stuff and redo stuff and rename podcast episodes and whatnot, but we succeeded, and we're here now.
Yeah, that's what counts.
Yeah,
so how have things been? It's been absolutely ages since we talked.
Yeah, well, now I don't remember if it was last week or the week before, to be honest, but we were in here during winter time. As I've said on previous podcasts, I started doing sea kayaking. So during winter time, well, you can go out sea kayaking, but you need a dry suit, which costs a lot of money. So, and we don't have that. But then what we can do is we can go to the swimming hall. So we take the kayaks into the swimming stadium and we train in the swimming pool to do like Eskimo rolls is what we call in Danish. I don't know what the English word is, but without getting out of the kayak, you're upside down in the water, and then you learn how to get back up out of the water without exiting the kayak at all. And I actually managed to do the first roll this last time when we went to practice. For the first time, I succeeded in rolling around. So that was pretty cool.
That is really cool. I've never managed to do a full one. I was whitewater kayaking, so much smaller, like half the size of a ocean kayak, a sea kayak, and I still never quite learned the hip snap part to get myself fully back on my own. So that's really cool that you could have managed one.
Yeah. Well, it was like the time before. My wife succeeded doing it, and she was just like, and she did it like 10, 15 times, like whoop, 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 round. And I was just so much struggling. I was like, fuck, I can't do it. But then last time we were here in the swimming hall, we had a couple of instructors with us. So I think the instructor probably spent like an hour with me trying to explain how, because it is really, I mean, when I succeeded, I was actually surprised to see how little muscle power you need to use. It's all about technique. You almost need to do nothing to flip around if you just use the right technique. So and if you like angle your body just slightly wrong, or you use your arms slightly in the wrong way, you're not going to flip around. So it's really about technique. So, but I succeeded. But now, of course, I'm concerned the next time we're going to go train, then I can't do it again.
Well, it's all muscle memory, so eventually you'll get it down. But that is awesome. However, it's hilarious. Your wife was like, "Woo! I'm just rolling like."
Yeah, she was just rolling around, and was like, "Well, it's quite easy." Yeah, so, yeah, that's easy for you to say.
For her, that's fantastic.
Yeah. But other than that, then in terms of working wise, we've sent book 1 of our new series off to the editor. So we're waiting to get it back from the first editor, and then it'll go to the second editor, and so on. But we're getting there now, so that's pretty cool. And otherwise, we've started to look ahead for 2020, and are going to discuss some of our future plans and so on. But I quite like this time of year when we're sort of reviewing what are we going to do next, and so that's always fun to me.
It is. I think it's good to do that. You should do it in your life. You should do it in your writing, your book marketing, whatever you got going on. I think so many people don't take the opportunity to reflect and then reorganize and then hit the new year with maybe some new goals and some new operations and stuff. So I agree. Which again, go figure. We tend to agree on just about everything. So it's no surprise we both enjoy looking over stuff. And I think it gets your passion going. If you feel like you're just doing the same old thing and you just need to keep plugging away at it, you lose the passion, and it's half the fun is getting that back and getting excited about things and what you're going to do for the next year.
Yeah, indeed. So how about you? What have you been busy with the last couple of weeks?
Sick.
But apart from being sick.
Not much. I managed to get the editing done, and so that's been off, and I'm going to be starting to delve into getting our website for @elysium.com going. Some minor things like that. So I'm looking forward to really getting into that more. But I was surprised. The last time I was truly sick was actually right when I came back from London in January 2019. I got kind of the same thing. So chills, really sick. And that only knocked me down for 3 days. But this one, it was funny. I'd start feeling better, and then I'd be sick for 2 days. And then I'd start feeling better and be sick for 2 days. Oh, it's been a nightmare. I really thought, I was surprised when I got the COVID test results back as negative. I'm like, really? If this isn't COVID, there's some other nasty bugs out there, and no one should ever have to go through this. But I have never had chills, like shaking so hard while I had a fever in my entire life. Thank goodness my husband has a wilderness medical training, because he's like, I wasn't worried. We're fine. I know what to do. But I was like, this ain't right. This is not right.
Yeah. But there is a bug like that going around. Because, I mean, over the last 2 weeks, I was sick for a couple of days as well. Yeah. And I didn't have the shakes like you're describing there, but I did have a fever, and I was absolutely sure that this is COVID, because it felt like, all the flu kind of symptoms, all the stuff that you hear about, and your throat, you can feel it all the time. It was exactly like the symptoms described for COVID. But I also went and got a test, and it was negative. Yeah. But there is something going around like that at the moment. But
yes. I mean, none of our listeners catch it. It's not contagious through podcast, thank goodness.
I don't think it's contagious through podcasting. At least I hope not.
I hope not. But yeah, I mean, as I've described it, I feel like I've actually been sleeping with a hot water bottle. I feel like my internal thermostat, we speak in car language all the time, I'm not sure, but my thermostat is busted. It is not working. So please, if you find yourself getting cold, stay warm. Make sure I was sleeping with a hat on and a hot water bottle and a coat, and it's just ridiculous. But yeah, keep yourself warm and healthy, and have a good December, because you don't want to get sick at the beginning of winter. I'm going to have a sore throat all winter now. Yay.
Yeah.
A week on the internet with the AmWritingFantasy podcast.
So I found a very interesting article on the internet that I just thought I would share here.
Excellent.
Because it's probably over the past month or something like that, I've been posting sort of different topics to our Patreon supporters about different aspects of big publishers merging together, and sort of the effect that it might or might not have on us authors, that all these big publishers are merging, like lower advances, lower royalty payments, and so on. I mean, for us indie publishers, it's not so concerning, but for everybody doing the traditional publishing, then I've been just making different Patreon posts about that. But then I found this article as well about Penguin, Random House, and Simon & Schuster. They're looking to merge in a $2.2 billion deal.
Wow.
But then the U.S. Justice Department stepped in and blocked the merge. Did you see that?
No, I did not. It's funny, I read the news a lot, but I did not see that one.
No. So the U.S. Justice Department says that the merger would create a too dominant market role, and it would hurt authors and readers. What do you think about that?
Well, it's funny. I agree. We need competition, and so there are things to keep something from developing into something that's going to squash competition. But then I look at Facebook and Amazon, and thankful.
Not saying anything, Facebook.
Yeah. And they haven't considered that dominating things. I mean, especially when Amazon bought Goodreads and they own publishing, and they're like the dominant market, but at least they're trying to protect the brick and mortar ones. It's good that they're maintaining some competition out there.
Yeah, I mean, from a publishing point of view, Penguin is the largest publisher, and their largest rival is Simon & Schuster. So those two merging would generate like a massive dominance in the market. And in my view, it would be like unprecedented. What do you say? Unprecedented. That was what I was trying to say. Control of the publishing industry, right? So I fully agree with the U.S. Justice Department here. I think it's a good thing that they're blocking this. But of course, the lawyer of Penguin then claims that it would actually be good for the authors if the two giants merged, and that the publishing imprints will continue to compete against each other, is what he said. I don't buy that for a second.
I don't buy that. I think it would give them a better edge to compete against Amazon, but Amazon is so far ahead in ebooks, and they're just they're pretty solid in paperbacks, but they're just delving into hardcover. So I think it would put them against each other pretty solidly that way, but I don't think it would help authors to have basically your choice is Amazon or whatever Penguin Schuster would be called. But I mean, to me, it's almost like Amazon decided to buy. Oh gosh, now I might just completely blanked. But where we're also have our paperbacks published, Ingram Spark. Like if Amazon bought Ingram Spark, authors would be doomed, just doomed. But I don't think Ingram Spark wants to go under. But yeah, that is like the only other real competition for Amazon is Ingram Spark, and a lot of people don't even realize it.
You're right. Yeah, and Spotify just bought FindaWay Voices.
Oh, wow. Really? Jeez, there's some shakeup going on.
Yeah. They want to be the dominant audio producer, just like YouTube being for video. Spotify want to dominate the entire audio market.
Oh, that'll be interesting.
And you also saw, of course, that was like earlier in the year, but also Spotify buying Joe Rogan's podcast for $100 million and stuff like that, right? So they're really playing hard in trying to just dominate the audio market, which I probably think I think they're onto something. But of course, from a content creator point of view, you can be nervous that it's gonna be the same outcome as it was for musicians, like they're getting paid pennies when it's paid on when their or music is played on Spotify, and you could be concerned about the same thing here from a audiobook kind of perspective. Now that they bought FindaWay Voices, that you also gonna end up in a situation where we authors are just gonna get paid a few pennies per audiobook play. So that is a bit concerning.
I agree. It's we'll something to keep an eye on. Yeah.
And on to today's topic.
All right, so Jade City is a World Fantasy Award winner. It is, or it was named as one of the Times top 100 fantasy books of all time, and it was a Nebula Award nominee for Best Novel. So, and I actually went, now it's a couple of days ago, but I did go and check the sales ranking on Amazon, and I think you will see if you do that it's selling quite well. So there is a reason why we picked this book in the first place.
Yeah, and I have to say, in some ways, it really impressed me. I was so excited. I think by the time I hit chapter 2 or 3, I mean, I was into it. There was no way I wasn't going to finish the book. So I can say that, but I don't know when we'll get there. But my impression at the end, I'll let you know if I still felt that way and I went on, because it is a trilogy and there's a book 2 and a 3. I will say we'll get to maybe how I felt at the end in a little bit, but I will say when I first started reading it, it was unlike the last critical review we did, which was of the 5th season. That one we were
Mm,
talking about tense changes. I mean, that was very much literary fantasy. This one
yeah.
was true fantasy. Not it wasn't even high fantasy. The setting and the time is more like Japan, just after World War One, maybe, or just after the US, came in and started taking over just after Japan. Now I can't even remember the date that is, but when Japan opens up to the rest of the world and goes from the Shogun period into a modern era. So it's right at that cusp. There's guns, there's different far-flung politics, but this central, very strong government that is used to a very traditional way of doing things, and the clans are there, and it's if you like kung fu movies, it has so much of that. It was really
Yeah,
exciting. I
that's
kind of
true.
yeah, I've kind of it's just like the Grisham universe. I'm kind of really liking that there's a lot of fantasy that is not just medieval. It's really pulling up to different time periods now, and it's kind of like, well, this is different. This is exciting. I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, okay. I think I will not give my overall sort of conclusion on it. I think we'll talk through it, and then if it's not clear by everything else I say, then I can give my final words on this book by the end. But I think just as Autumn said in the beginning of the episode, we are heading into spoiler territory now.
Mhm.
So be warned, if you haven't read this book and want to read it, you probably want to stop now and
Yeah.
come back once you've read it, and then you can listen in and see if you agree with what we're saying here. But yeah, from now on, you have been warned.
That is very I think that's been clear. 2 warnings. You know what you're getting into if you continue on from here.
Yeah, but so I've made some different notes that sort of some, let's say, places where I feel like I can sort of drop in and talk about something. But
Excellent.
there is no like specific order to this. It's just like different notes on different thoughts. And then also some
Mm,
comments from Stephen, both from Goodreads, our Goodreads group, but also from Patreon.
excellent.
So I have some comments of his, and I uh, pick some of the comments where I also have a view on what he says. So it's sort of like they are good talking points. But I think first of all, I could start by saying this book is really well written.
Yes.
I really feel like it invokes feelings. The way she described things, the characters, and they do make me as the reader, I'm able to picture the scene in my mind
Yes.
when things are happening. So that
Mhm.
is really well done. So yeah, first let's say item on the list is just that it is really well written.
Definitely. I think it is worth reading. It is a fun book to read. It is engaging. The world is a little bit of different time period. If you do like kung fu movies, it has the magic system. I'm sure we'll get into that as well, with the jade and the green bones. The only people, the Kekanese, who are the ones who can actually use jade. Everyone else is, if they touch it, they either are unreactive. There's a few people who are in the world who are unreactive to jade, but the rest of them can basically become addicted. It's like opium, maybe. It's a good substitute for that, but it also gives you really amazing powers. So it's sort of the magic system, and it's really fun. I like that it's tied to a traditional item, that it works in very set ways. When she talks about, like, you can do this with it, you can do that with it, but it's really hard to do both. Some people are more powerful. They can wear tons of jade jewelry, and there's other people that, you put on 5 and you're maxed out. That's it. I like that there's variation, and it depends on who you are and your heritage, and that there's only this one select group of people, the Kekanese, who are truly, they're the jade warriors, the green bones, who can wear this. And it's also knowing a little bit of Japanese history and Chinese history, how important jade was. They buried their emperors wearing jade uniforms, and so I'm like, oh, it's tying in history, and it's jade. I love stones and I love green, so I just like this magic system. It really resonated with me.
Yeah, okay, cool. Because one of the points that I had written on my list here is really a question mark to myself. Is this magic system really that unique? Question mark. It was what I wrote on my list, because uh, it's basically just superpowers. I mean, yeah, you're using the jade to get your powers, but it's nothing more than that. I mean, the more I thought about it, the less unique I actually feel like the magic system is. I mean, it's fun and all that. It's not that, but if you're looking at it from a uniqueness point of view or trying to create something new, then I really don't feel it is that. I don't know if that's fair to say, but
I think in some ways, I mean, it's based on a lot of traditional. You could substitute any stone instead of jade on any universe. I mean, I know I've read other ones where it's just sort of like the elf stones of Shannara. You have the stones and you can do something with it. So I think it has a very strong heritage in the same aspect. But I like that she tied it in to a culture and a history. But again, I also know, and we'll probably get into that, or we can get into it now, but the jade is tied to a history that, again, I keep saying Japan. This is not supposed to be Japan. It's supposed to be Kekanese and Kekon. And that is, I think, to me, was the biggest weakness, is that it was so obvious what country it was and the time period and the era that I was just like, can we just call it Japan? It felt like it's an island, so I felt maybe this is supposed to be Okinawa. There's the one area there against, which to me is the Koreas, which Japan has a huge history of fighting with the Korea. And then there's this sort of English / for some reason I kept thinking of Spain, but it might be because it was started with like España, it had that kind of name to me. So it was like an English / European foreign power as well. It's just like, it was so obvious that I was like, make it either more different and truly unique, or just call it what it is, because it's not even a filmy gray layer. It's pretty apparent what you're trying to base this on.
Yeah, I think that's correct. Not necessarily that I think that's a problem as such. I mean, I know we've talked about many times during our monthly Q&A session with our students and patron supporters and so on, that if it's a horse, call it a horse, right? I mean, we said it many times, but I'm not sure it's a problem as such, that you are sort of mimicking close off of some real life place. Because on the other hand, if you called it Japan and then they were running around with jade powers, that might also feel wrong. But I don't know. But I don't necessarily think that's a problem. That's probably like a taste kind of thing or opinion thing.
Yeah,
I guess
some people. Yeah, I think some people will not mind it as much, but I was comparing it to like the Grisha books, the Grishaverse, which is also has some key aspects that are very much based on cultures of this planet, but she does a really good job of anchoring the history into her novel. They develop out of the novel and they have completely unique aspects based on the world. And I guess I like my fantasy just a little bit more fantasy, and this was so close to the real world with just a little veil of difference that I was like, well, I wanted to see, I think, a little more difference. I wanted a little more traditional, a little more history based on the world she was creating for the book, rather than something that, I could let me go check Wikipedia and make sure that is how it happened.
Yeah, and I think on that note, I could just sort of inject the comment we got from Stephen on Goodreads, because it sort of goes very much along with what you're talking about, I think, because Stephen said, quote, "Here we have a very Earth-like world with technology straight out of the late 70s, early 80s. Yeah, so that's just me saying he's in a different time zone or time period than you are thinking about it. But okay, then back to the quote. They have cars, they have guns, they have landline phones, their vocabulary is completely from modern times. Lee basically took the idea of a jade-based magic system and shoved it into a culture of Oriental gangs from the 70s. End quote. Right, so he's thinking that this is like late 70s, early 80s, where you're talking about after World War I. So there's a bit of, let's say, change there. Yeah. But again, I'm not so sure that I fully agree with the fact that their vocabulary is completely from modern times, like he says. Well, maybe it is, but I don't necessarily think that's a problem. I mean, for me, this is a fantasy setting. So who knows how they talk? I mean, but it goes very much along with what you were talking about. Like it feels like Japan, so why not just say it's Japan, and so on and so on. Whereas I just view it as it's a fantasy setting, so she can do whatever she wants, and maybe it is indeed heavily inspired by some real life cultures and real life locations. I don't disagree with that. I also think that it is that, just like Stephen is saying and like you're saying as well. But I guess I'm just not seeing it as a problem.
I think that just comes down to personal taste. To me, I'd like to see it. I would like to, if I didn't understand a word, like how the people greet each other, there is language used. And I'm pretty sure all the language used was Japanese. And I basically could have put it into Google Translator and checked it. I think there's a part of me who said, I would rather have that as a fantasy language. Make it up to fit your world, and don't just make it so that
Are you saying you did check it?
I did not, but I had assumed that I probably could have, with that a lot of, except for the place names, that some of the greetings, some of the words, some of the language, the traditions were very much based on real things that you could Google or check on Wikipedia and double check. And I was just like, that's...
I never thought about that, actually.
Yeah, to me, I'm like, I would rather have that just shifted a little more into fantasy. Otherwise, it felt a little... not cheating, it just felt like a little bit more work could have been done to make it really have like, wow, that is fantastic, that is so cool, instead of going like, yeah, I read that the other day in an article on Wikipedia, cool.
Yeah. No, fair enough. But I have another comment as well from Stephen, which this time I very much agree with him. So are you ready for this one? It's also about culture and stuff. So he says, a quote, "I think if a culture had such a magic system for many centuries, it would have drastically filtered all areas of history and industry in such a way that the world would be a very different place. How would Jade have affected the countless wars over the centuries? How would it have affected the world governments? How would it have affected technology? She doesn't really answer those questions," end quote. And here I really agree with Stephen. Because if you just imagine, like, you take these Jade warriors and you put them in some sort of special forces in the military, I mean, there's nothing they couldn't do, right? I mean, yeah, you have guns and stuff, you can shoot them, but I mean, if they are like special forces and they sneak in behind enemy lines, I mean, just they can wreak complete havoc. And there's not much you can do to stop them. So, and I don't think that she really concerns herself with the fact that wouldn't governments also try to find ways to basically leverage these kind of people and conquer other countries and stuff like that? It's never mentioned really. And from a world building perspective, I just felt like there was stuff that could have been explored further here.
Yeah, I completely agree. The one thing I did like is that she does have the kind of European foreign power, is trying to develop a drug to allow
Spain,
them,
wasn't it?
Yeah, to allow their military to also be able to use Jade. And I mean, it has bad side effects. It basically makes you addicted. It can completely overreact. So I like that. That was a really cool aspect. But looking at the history, basically all the history you have of Kekan and the Kekanese and the Jade warriors is that they were kind of guerrilla fighters. There was a foreign country that was controlling them, and they came down the hills, they fought for freedom in a revolution, and they won it very, very recently. But it's just like, well,
but why haven't they just taken over the world?
I know. And again, like you were saying, I mean, you have these guys trained, they can deflect bullets, they have the power to there's like 6 major powers, and one of them is deflection. So yeah, you have some ninja-like trained warriors. You could go assassinate just about anyone.
Yeah, they have a super fast speed, and they have super strong, or super strength as well. So, I mean, there's almost nothing they can't do.
No, it's neat because she did have setups where it's like, it's really hard to do 2 of those at once. It's almost like you can only do 1 at a time unless you're really, really good. And you have to be well trained. I mean, there's a school you go through, I don't know how many years of schooling just to be able to learn to harness this energy. I loved all of that. But again, once you became a full-blooded Jade warrior, a greenbone, you're pretty much it's like it all was just clan infighting to control this tiny nation, where it's like their history, these people should have been rulers, they should have been godlike. There's mentions of being descendant from gods, but it's not developed to the point to explain that why they were so insignificant in their own culture prior to this period. And I agree with Stephen wholeheartedly. It just felt like it was missing. And if this was a real fantasy culture, their history would have probably needed a lot more explanation of why they weren't ruling other countries, an incredibly wealthy country and a huge superpower, because they got the skills.
Yeah, indeed. And that's the part where I don't quite understand why they're just sticking to their small little island here. I mean, why? And then, okay, fair enough. Gang fighting and stuff like, it is basically gangs fighting each other and so on. But come on, I mean, the government would have stepped in and say, hey, guys, you're going to be filthy rich, all of you, if you work for us and we go out and we conquer other nations. I mean, they would have done that.
I agree, and again, I think I didn't quite...
and could have just. I was just about to finish my thought there, because she could just have mentioned it as a short paragraph somewhere, just saying for whatever reason they didn't want to, or just give some sort of explanation to why, and then that would have been closed, right? But because it's never mentioned, then it just makes me wonder.
Yeah. And I think, again, this is where she was relying way too heavily on the history of Japan, because they did close their borders for 200 years. They basically were not open up to the rest of the world until the US came in with a steamship and basically opened up a country from the Shogun era, where they were using samurais, to basically fast forward within a matter of years to a full industrial nation. And if you know the history, you're kind of like, oh, she's just basically assuming this is what happened here, and just mentioning, instead of the shoguns, as it's the warriors in the mountains and the revolutions and the guerrillas and blah, 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 blah. But that doesn't work. This is supposed to be a fan. It's not explained with the magic system she has. And that's where, again, I have the problem that if you're going to develop this culture and this history and it's a different world, don't just rely on what happened in this world, because it doesn't fit. It's going to leave you these disjointed things that I'm like, I don't understand why this would happen this way.
No, I agree. And one of the things we talk a lot about in our world building course is basically making sure that you analyze what are the wider consequences of the magic system and of the things that you develop in your world, because it will have impact on other things in society, on other nations, maybe in this case, and so on. So it's not that you have to play that all out, meaning that it's not like the Kekonese needs to then conquer the world or stuff, but at least you need to think about what does it mean, and then I don't want as an author to have the Kekonese conquer the world, then at least I should have an explanation for why they didn't do so. And in the same vein here, Stephen also said, if jade is such a powerful substance, has anyone tried to harness it as a power source? Even if Fonda Lee threw a line in there somewhere about scientists studying jade to find other uses, but to no avail because it only enhances people of Kekonese bloodline, I would have been able to accept that. But then it would have brought me back to my initial question of why would those jade-powered supers have been content with just their tiny corner of the world? And then we're back where we started, right? But again, I mean, this is again the wider consequences of having jade powers. And if you can really get that many powers out of a jade stone, then I understand what Stephen means in terms of it's not only about military strength here, right? I mean, you probably would wonder as a government as well, I wonder if we can use this as a power source for other things, right? And again, like Stephen also says, it's not that the Fonda Lee then needs to make that into something. She could, like Stephen says, she could just have made a small paragraph somewhere explaining why they tried and they failed and decided not to go any further or whatever, and then fine, right? But I'm really missing from a world building perspective. I think it is a really cool setting, so don't get me wrong. I think it's quite cool, but what would have just made it even better would have been some consideration about this wider consequence of the jade powers, and I really feel that is completely missing.
I completely agree with you and Stephen that it's just there's something missing. I mean, there could have been any explanation why Jade warriors were limited, why they were sick, there was a disease, something. Just I wanted some explanation of why they seemed so minimal. They were just they had clan leadership, but it was just this little island. Why not more? But I also want to get into the characters because I think
that was just what I was thinking about.
Really, it's like we haven't talked in like 2 weeks, and we're still on the same wavelength. That's good.
Yeah.
All right. But that was, I think, my other love and hate of the story were when it came down to the characters. They were well developed. They were interesting. They had very strong personalities. And there were two I wanted to really bond. Well, I guess there was three I wanted to bond with. The one was the clan leader, who was Lan. He was my favorite up until, okay, very big spoiler alert, he dies. And up until that point, I was really excited. Like, he did not want to be the leader of a clan during a war. And that's where this world was heading. There was going to be a clan war. And he was basically the only one trying to keep everything together. He was an awesome, peaceful clan leader. But I'm like, I want to see how he changes, how he transforms. And boom, kills him off. So I was like, ugh. And there was Shay, which was his sister, and I wanted to like her. She had gone out and explored the world and come back. And there was a few chapters in there where I was like, do I go back to my clan? Do I not go back to my... And I got to the point, I'm like, just make a decision. I was getting a little sick of her indecision. And I never bonded with her because she was just too wishy-washy. And the only other one I kind of liked was Emery Andon, who was the young Jade Bone, who had quite the backstory. His mother was like too sensitive, went bad. His father's European, well, okay, quote unquote European. We're just going to call him that. And he's highly sensitive to Jade. He can do amazing things with it. But he was also too emotional. There's times I wish he was a girl, but then I would have been really annoyed he was so emotional. At least as a guy, he was like, oh, okay, a really emotional guy. That's kind of different. But I didn't bond with him either. And at the end of the book, that is actually what kept me from buying book 2. It's like, this is interesting. I have some questions about the world and the jade and the magic, but I really don't really care. They killed off Lan, and I don't really care what happens to any of the characters enough to make me go buy book 2 right now, maybe if I have some spare time later. And that surprised me. I was really all set to love this book, but I didn't find the character that really made me want to turn the next page.
No, and funny enough, as usual, we agree here. I mean, really? Lan was also the only one that slightly had my interest until he was killed. But because it's like, I feel like from the very first page, the world building really comes into its own right? Immediately you're sucked into this pretty cool setting, and I was very hooked in the first couple of chapters. Like, this is really great. But then the character building and making me as a reader care for those characters never really happened. No. It's also, I feel also it's a bit difficult to care for characters who are part of a crime syndicate and they just hurt other people and stuff like that. And it's that alone, that in its own is a bit difficult. It's like the short story we wrote as a prequel for our new series. Basically, the main character there is one of the villain so that also there it was a struggle to make a character the readers would actually care about, because he is actually not that good of a guy. And I feel like that's the same problem here. Yeah. That it's just like, and there is no real character development. I feel like that there's no real character arcs. It's just like a straightforward standard gangster succession story, really. That's it.
Yeah, I think you really put your finger on it. There's no character arc. I thought, like I said, Lan had some potential, and I was interested to see where he grew to, and he dies. And that was the only one who really I saw a potential arc to. Even Emery, I thought at the end, he totally acts out at the perfect storm moment to not act out in a culture where you don't act out. Insults his family, insults everyone, like a huge slap in the face to his family. And I was just like, I wanted some reservations. Like, I understood as a writer why you would do that, because to me, you're writing fantasy, it's always like emotions are supercharged. Things happen, big drama. But I just wanted some restraint from his character to show some sign of growth, of thinking beyond his own needs. And yeah, he was being used, but again, in the family setting, it was kind of, he needed to have been used at that point. And it was also an opportunity for him to grow, and he just didn't. And I just was so disappointed in him at the end, specifically, where I'm like, okay, maybe there's potential. And I was like, I really don't care what happens to him after this. And like I said, I had that one thought. I'm like, gosh, it would have been interesting if he had been a strong woman, because there's only a couple strong women's, because it's a very, again, a patriarchal, very patriarchal society, even though it's written by a woman. And I thought, well, I didn't connect with anyone, and that's really a shame, because it's the story itself had so much potential.
Yeah, and of course, this is a critical reading episode, so we are being very critical.
are.
Overall, I would say it is an entertaining read. It's a good book. So it's just us being very critical here, because it's a critical reading episode. But so I'll continue in the same way and being a bit critical, because what I also felt like, I would really have liked some sort of surprise or twist about something, just something. But everything was so straightforward that I really felt like, not that I could predict everything that would happen as such, but and I don't know if maybe Lance's death, you could say, was a bit of a surprise. I was not suspecting him to die, so that was a bit of a surprise. But
no,
but I don't know. It just felt too straightforward, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I do. I was I knew Lane was either going to die or he's going to have an awesome character arc, and I was so hungry for that character arc, and it didn't happen. And I was a little surprised at how they used Emery to defeat the other clan. Or, well, it wasn't really a defeat, but how they used him and his power. But it completely made sense. And if you were paying maybe attention to Emery a little bit more, you would have totally seen where that was coming from. So everything very much built off of everything you expected to in the story. And there was no huge surprise twist. There was no women coming in to save the day, which, I always hoped for, but it didn't happen.
No, that's true.
Yeah. Everything was just a little too stuck in its box and stayed there pretty tidily. And so there I kind of agree. I wanted something a bit more exciting, something a bit more surprising, and it never developed. I was actually really holding up when Lan, the night he dies, he gets a letter from his ex-wife that he had let go. He was way too nice of a character in many ways for the world he was in. And I always wanted to know what was in that letter. It was like the hanging thread. I was expecting her to say, well, actually I left and I was pregnant with you, and he's your son or your daughter, which would have been really awesome. And it's time she come back and begin her training with you. I would have been heart-stoppingly so excited. But they never actually mentioned the letter. He puts it in a drawer, and no one finds it. I'm like, is this in book 2?
It's book 2, yeah.
I don't. And again, that's about the only curiosity I have, is what was in this really thick letter. And it's at least I'm curious about it. But if there had been some tease,
it's for book 2, Lauren. That's the point.
But it would have been better to end book 1 with someone having found it and opening it and going, oh my gosh! Then I would have been book 2 right there. Then, oh my gosh.
You would get so much heat from readers if you did that. Oh my God, they would get upset.
I know, but I would have bought it in a heartbeat just to find out what was said. So
right.
I didn't have that draw. And again, I agree with you. This book, it's worth reading. It's entertaining. It's beautiful. If you love Kung Fu, it is such a fun book to read. I think book 2 and 3 might be worth reading. I mean, the reviews are astounding. The book sales are astounding. It's probably worth reading. Yeah, but
I'm not gonna.
I wasn't drawn to it enough.
No, me neither.
And I think there's something to learn there as a writer, that there's something missing with the character arc. Something a lot of people, even Stephen, had mentioned. He didn't connect with the characters.
Yeah, and of course, well, everybody could then say, "Yeah, that's nice. You guys are saying that, but this is a top 100 fantasy book of all time. It's a
It
Nebula
is.
Award nominee for best novel and so on." Yeah, and fair enough, yes, but we can only speak of our own opinions here, and if I'm very honest about it, the only thing, in my opinion, I can say I don't understand why it is that highly praised. It's a good book, yes.
All right.
It's a good story, yes. It is very well written,
Mm,
great world building, maybe with some missing pieces like we talked about here.
yeah.
But I don't feel it's that good that it should be that highly praised. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm just weird and I'm not like everybody else. And fair enough if that's the case, but I don't know. I enjoyed it. Good read, good entertainment. But if I hadn't known that it was a award-winning novel like this, I would never have guessed it. Let me put it that way.
Agreed. I think I've read some indie fiction that I think rivals it, and tops it. So it's interesting that it got picked for. It is such an award-winning and so touted. I think there's a lot of great books out there. It's no better than a lot of them. I mean, well, okay, it's better than some of the really rough ones, but it's on par. It's a good book. It's entertaining. There's other ones that are probably more exceptional, but other than that, again, it is my opinion. It was worth reading, but wow, I can only complain to have the problem she has with how well it's doing. Good luck, best for her. I'm so excited. I wish every author who wrote that well or on par could do as well.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I think one last thing I had on my list to mention here, because this is really something I've learned, not from this novel alone, but sort of from all these kind of bestseller novels that we read over the. I mean, we read one before as well for this podcast, but outside of the podcast here, we have also had like 4 or 5 something like that, very best-selling books that
Yeah.
we've read over the last month, just because we were trying to see what are the common denominators in these books. And what I have learned, and this book is exactly the same, and I've been surprised about this because it's not, I guess, my standard preference, but I just have to admit as well that after reading all of these massively successful bestsellers, what they all have in common is that they are fairly slow paced.
Yes.
All of them. This one as well. You know, it takes time before things get going. It's not that nothing is happening, but it's not a fast-paced one where you're like flipping pages to see what happens next. It's fairly slow-paced. It takes a time where you just spend time with the characters. And all of these very, very successful novels, they all do this. So I know some people sometimes say, well, it feels a bit boring because not enough is happening. But at the same time, I just have to, concede and say, well, apparently that's what most people want. That's the only conclusion I can draw, because I've seen it over and over and over again now.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's something, and it's definitely not to my taste. Like I said, there was probably 2 or 3 chapters I'm like, you could have cut one of these out. Oh my gosh, it's so slow in the beginning, especially without the character development more. I think that could have been stronger. But yeah, a lot of these incredibly best-selling books are slow-paced, and there seems to be a lot of time just spent dilly-dallying and learning parts of the world. And remember one I read, there was a lot of cooking and food descriptions, and I'm a foodie, and I was getting a little tired of the cooking and the food descriptions. And that's a lot of cooking and food descriptions.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. The point with slow pace is not to be boring. That's not what I'm saying. All right. I mean, if you just have chapters full of cooking and nothing is happening, that is boring. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm more saying things are happening, and things were also happening in Jade City, but it just takes it time with it. Nothing is rushed. It's just slow paced.
Yeah, slower than you might think. If you're writing slow and you think it's slow, you might be okay. Read a couple of these books and see how you measure up.
Yeah. All right. Anything else on your list, Autumn, or is that it?
That's it. I think we covered all my big topics. So, yeah, I will just say it is a good book. It's worth reading. There's also a lot of great indie authors out there. So, yeah, go check out a book.
All right. That's good. So next Monday, I have a great interview lined up for you, and I hope very much you're going to enjoy that one. So see you then.
If you like what you just heard, there's a few things you can do to support the AmWriting Fantasy Podcast. Please tell a fellow author about the show and visit us at Apple Podcast and leave a rating and review. You can also join Autumn and Jasper on patreon.com/AmWritingFantasy. For as little as $1 a month, you'll get awesome rewards and keep the AmWriting Fantasy Podcast going. Stay safe out there and see you next Monday.